Okay, so a few questions that I'd like to ask. One of the things that struck me, and you're showing the picture of yourself as a little kid, is so bang on. I mean, I felt that university was what killed the creativity in me, because I used to write stories and stuff before that, and then I got so into analytical thinking, and then I did an MBA and it got worse. So the question in my mind is, particularly within large sort of bureaucratic organizations, even if they want to encourage creativity, is it really feasible and sustainable? Is there any way they can really do that?
It really depends on the structure. Creativity is not something that you can slap onto a company, right? You have to build it into the company's DNA. Companies like Google are creative because they build it in. They build it in. It's built in that 20% of time.
Although I've heard that they're lessening that now.
Yeah, everyone shifts around. Apple's been trying it. 3M does that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But it's not the kind of. That's the classic thing with EMI or companies like that. You would think that a company that has so many advantages with music would be able to transition. It's impossible to transition because that's not the nature of the company. So the commitment from the top has to be huge, and then the teams have to be small, right? Because massive teams with massive bureaucracy ideas do not do well in those environments because it's very hard to get them routing.
Absolutely.
Routing is so important for ideas, right? You have to take an idea from infancy to a final product and take it on a creative journey. It takes incredible discipline in terms of you have to give the product, you have to give the ideas a chance to live and breathe. And it's not just about getting from point A to point B. And that's difficult in big organizations.
Well, that's another thing that I found really interesting in what you were saying is that you need the structural foundation in order to let creativity flourish.
Absolutely.
So how does that work? Can you elaborate a bit more on?
Well, people think of the arts as being free floating, right? But the arts is not free floating. It's incredibly structured. You go everywhere from dancers to painters to musicians. There's an incredible creative structure but it's all in support of an imagination, right? But without one, the other doesn't exist. But if you have no structure to deliver the ideas, they won't be delivered.
Right.
So you have to have both.
Right.
But you have to allow for this freedom of imagination on top.
So it's a difficult balance.
It is a balance, absolutely.
But you're right, I've been on modern dance boards, and you're quite right. They go in, they rehearse, they
practice.
Intense. Very structured.
It's a very intense business. It's a business. It's an intense business.
Yeah.
And to say that, and that's the thing that people don't realize. From the outside, the arts looks lots of fun, but there's anyway, it's very very structured.
Yes. One of the things that also really resonated with me, you sort of commented about you've got these 500 different things on the go. How do you focus?
I have teams that work on different projects, and I'm very good at flipping.
Okay.
And I'm very good with disengaging my creative thinking from the genre itself.
Mm-hmm.
So the idea being that if you are too married to your discipline, it becomes very difficult to see the angles and become interested in other things. So for me, I've somehow been able to disengage that. So I find technology as interesting as music.
Right.
Or I find many different things are as interesting as other things because the process that goes into them is the same process. It's just a slightly different tilt on it.
Well, and presumably the fact that you're involved in these different types of disciplines, the creativity from one will affect your decisions or creativity in that.
Absolutely, and you can't run everything at the same time. That's the
right.
Time limits you. You can't be doing everything at once. You can't, you lose something in the translation, but you do as much as you can.
Yeah.
And you're usually pushing towards the successful ones and dumping the ones that aren't working.
That makes sense. What about, I'm interested in your thoughts on creativity versus copyright and how musicians, when you talk about, and I've seen this, the need to just perform now as opposed to relying on record sales. But as everybody, where do you draw the lines between what's an appropriate mashup or borrowing of somebody else's content to create your own versus?
Well, I mean, and that's always the balance, right? I mean, if you're stealing somebody's vocal line and using it in your song, they're gonna want a percentage of that.
Yeah.
If you're taking the impression of a bass line, it depends. It's a gray area. If you those are all, those are gray areas. Mm-hmm. But I mean, I always think of artists as thieves, right? And I think of entrepreneurs as thieves as well. Right. Like our job as entrepreneurs and artists is to suck the best ideas around us, hold on to them, and then strip away all the crap, and then meld the ideas that are good together and make new things.
So what suggestions would you have for businesses that want to try and maintain that creativity as they grow?
I think that you have to invest in your creativity.
Okay.
You have to invest time, money, people into creativity. You have to build small teams.
And how small is small? What's a size after which it doesn't work?
For initial ideas, it's no more than, say, every team is different. That's the thing about it, from 3 to 10 people, somewhere in there. Yeah. Beyond that, with a hierarchy within that structure, right. Within that, say, 10 structure or that 5 structure. But that's for initial ideas, for generating new ideas that are sparks, right? That you can build upon. Mm-hmm. And then you suck out the good ones and you discard the bad ones. But it takes a commitment, right? Just like, that's the thing that artists really understand. They understand the commitment to something, even though the payoff may be nothing. It's very likely to be nothing, right? Yeah. We're committed to things because we love them, and we will do them for nothing, because we love it and have to. Yes. And that's the big rub, right? So to get really great ideas, sometimes business has to commit enough investment. If they're willing to get nothing, it doesn't work out. Yeah. Which is pretty hard. Which is really hard. Yeah, especially when we've got stock markets that penalize that. Exactly. Right. And it's very difficult. So it's not easy, but it's like an investment, right? But I think about this a lot. I mean, if in the world that we live in, is time spent on creative thinking and investment or expense? Mm-hmm. Depends on your worldview. Right. Depends what you think of the internet. If you think it's here to stay, if you think that change and revolution is here to stay, or if it's a fad. It depends where your business is, right? Like if you're making a widget and you can make the same widget from now to eternity, you're still going to make money, then you don't really need to invest in anything. Right. But if your business is going to be affected really heavily by change in the next 5 years, then there's a much greater incentive to be innovative, to be creative, to invest in those things, because those are the people that are going to understand change and be able to move quickly when you need them. Right. You commented that with the internet, the skills that we need to be learning and teaching even at the grade school level are different. One of the things that of course has occurred to me is, why do we still force memorization? Does that make sense? Well, it's a balance though, right? If you're going to be a doctor, I want you to be smart and learn lots of stuff and get crammed into your brain. Yes. Right? You need to have. But I also want you to be willing and able to look up what's the most recent research. Absolutely, absolutely. But it's a balance between those two things, right? But for many, many things, the information is different. The way we gather information is different. It's no longer about, memorizing very specific things in a specific order, everyone learning exactly the same time, the same way, in the same subjects. For me, it's much more about encouraging kids to follow things that interest them, so we maintain interest. Because that's the hardest thing, right, for kids, is to maintain that sense that education is a fun, interesting thing. Right. And that's what you want. You want them to be interested in what they're learning. And it's the same with adults, right? Adults are interesting. Most adults have stopped learning by the age of 30. That's a scary thing. But learning things outside of what's specifically related to their job. It's true. It's very rare. Even for myself. I was in music. I had a career in music for a long time, and it was only when I started to really get back into learning again, where I was like, oh my God, learning inspires learning. Right? And so when you refine that, this is the thing that kids need to have throughout their education.
Right.
Not be turned off by education so they don't want to learn.
Right.
Learning is incredible, right? Learning is where it all comes from.
Yeah.
And so when you hit that trigger in later life, it's like, wow, this is a great thing. It's fun.
So what got you into the whole business side of things? The need to make money?
I mean, beyond the need to make money, I mean, money is all for everyone, so it's an impetus. But at the same time, I really love ideas. I really love ideas in different disciplines, different genres. I like to make stuff. I try not to think about, I'm lucky that I get to make things that I'm interested in.
Yes, absolutely. Well, I don't want to take more of your time, but this was a pleasure.
Thank you very much. I hope it made some kind of sense. I'm a little exhausted.